Last summer, I was in France serving a LDS mission, and my dad, he would write me every week, every so often. He was going on this huge bike ride from New York to California, all the way across the country, and how I was so amazed that had the dedication and determination to bike across the entire United States. I think about what that takes just physically. That's unbelievable to think about just the physical aspect, but to take it a step further and to be doing it for a greater cause, to be doing it to raise awareness for children.
We are going to have a 10-fold hit on DNA matches if we actually do this, and it is going to resolve so many crimes.
Safety education program that teaches not just self-defense and realistic physical skills to resist violence and abduction, but teaches children all about how to keep themselves safe.
And it sets minimum standards for sex offenders, and it asks states to come into compliance. Currently, only a few states are in compliance, and we need your state to come into compliance. There is money available.
Adam Walsh Act, the sex offender registry. Why don't we have it? The law was passed in 2006, but only 4 states and 2 territories that they complied with it.
I think that most parents don't think that bad things will happen to them or to their children. And when Elizabeth was abducted on June 5th, 2002, a reality set into our family that has not changed. People talk about what normal is in their life, and what normal is changes, particularly when you have a traumatic event. And I believe that in most cases, that normal changes to a new normal. It's not going to be the way it used to be. That doesn't mean that it can't be good.
When my daughter was taken, I was very lucky and I got her back. And that was an absolute miracle, and it was a great blessing to our family.
How did you get your daughter back?
You know, a lot of people were out there looking, and they saw her with the 2 people that took her, and they called the police, and the police came over and got them, and they brought my daughter home to me.
I remember Lois coming down the steps and slapping the lights on and seeing that cut screen and screaming. And from that point on, the reality of what happened in our life changed. I remember seeing her sit in our living room crying and being in the worst pain that I've ever seen her in, and feeling that, what can I do? What can I do? What should I be doing?
I'll never forget the emotion that I felt as I saw Elizabeth for the first time when she returned home. She was sitting on a sofa and the door opened, and I looked over there and I saw this girl who had matured so amazingly. I couldn't imagine a child growing into such a young woman as she did. And a myriad of things were going through my mind, and I thought, this has got to be here. And I ran over there and I grabbed her, and of course I was crying. And Lois we had no idea what I was going to find. and Lois wasn't with me at the time. But I grabbed her and I was crying, and finally I held her back and I said, "Elizabeth, is it really you?" And at that point she started crying and she said, "Yes, Dad."
And I remember being escorted off into the police car, and we headed for Salt Lake Police Department, and calling Lois and saying, "Lois, you're not going to believe this, but Elizabeth is really here. We're going to be okay." And Elizabeth was sitting virtually on my lap, and Lois was screaming, "Let me talk to her, let me talk to her." And the cell phone went dead.
And I am Ahmad Rivaswara. Not one more child, not here, not anywhere. I got home from work, and my sister-in-law, who lives in Pensacola, Florida, called me up, crying on the phone. She says she saw on the news that they showed my ex-wife's apartment, saying that 2 little girls were abducted from that apartment, and they were both found dead. And she says she tried to call the police, but they wouldn't give her any information. And so she told me to call Santa Rosa Sheriff Department. I called Santa Rosa Sheriff Department and got a deputy sheriff on the phone. I told him who I was, and I told him that the story that my sister-in-law had seen on TV, and I wanted to see if those 2 girls were my kids. He asked me a few questions, and then he told me, yes, that is true, that the 2 little girls were my kids, and he couldn't tell me anything else unless I arrived in person. I am a surviving parent. Just like my fellow surviving parents, we've felt the pain and agony of losing a child, have a child still missing, or recovered our child deceased. I had 2 daughters that were abducted. I can relate to my fellow coalition members, most of them, because I had one did not survive the horrible attack. But my 8-year-old walked out of the woods. She was left there to die with my 6-year-old Sarah. The sheriff deputy and the nurse, they showed me down in this basement. And I walked in that basement. My Sarah was laid out. I could see the anguish in her face. It covered her up to her neck. I can only see her face. I wanted to die.
She was playing at the ballpark. He was riding his bike. She was walking to school, following what she thought were the rules. She was playing in the yard.
Hi. Not like that. Like this. Not normal, but it looks better.
Susie was 19. She would have been 20 on April 6th of that year.
What are you doing over there?
We do not know what happened to her. It's like a needle in a haystack. She just vanished.
She was last seen getting off a bus at the Collins Circle near the visitors parking. There was an old employee ID badge found 2 months later off the visitors parking lot in kind of a grassy area. It had been out there for quite a period of time.
When her dorm room was looked at later, it looked as if she was coming back.
Make straight pieces of hair look curly.
Her hair dryer was on the bed, all her personal items were still there, She had money on top of her desk, change, money.
That her ATM card was used the day following her, her disappearance, in a convenience store that, was one that she wouldn't have gone to on her own.
Which was about 2 miles from the campus. The password was a direct hit.
Her boyfriend was the one. Rich told us that she was missing, and I believe he said, "Did you know that Suzanne didn't come home last night," or something to that effect.
Hi. Okay, so something for homecoming.
I don't care how I get her back, but I want her back.
In 2002 was a horrendous year of kidnapping and murder, and we were the very first on the first day. Between dinner and dessert, my daughter disappeared into the night.
When I was 13 years old, I had met a man on the internet, and he had groomed me and lured me outside to meet him. And he had abducted me and taken me to Virginia, where I was held captive for 4 days until I was rescued by the FBI.
Create the largest law enforcement army ever to go after the more than 1 million child pornographers that are in this country, in the United States, that are downloading and distributing child pornography. The Protect Act focuses on...
We have identified over 1 million individual computer serial numbers in this country actively uploading known images and videos of child pornography, which is really a nice way of saying crime scene images and videos of sexual assaults against children.
1/3 of the cases where they go in and are able to kick down that door to arrest the person that is downloading child pornography, they're able to rescue and save a child victim.
Ed Smart and Ahmad Riversfar are bicycle riding across the nation.
They're actually starting in Rochester, New York, and each stop will have a surviving member. So they're going to be riding into Columbus later on this afternoon.
Thank you so much for coming to the Ride for Their Lives. I want to start by thanking Limited Brands for being the national sponsor of the Surviving Parents Coalition's Ride for Their Lives.
Just like a lion, we care for our cubs. We gotta stop this cycle. We just can't give up, no.
This ride needs to get people's attention. That it's not just our mission, it should be all of our missions.
Just really celebrating the campaign and the awareness around protecting our children.
I can't imagine the pain and suffering and if anything we can do to keep that from happening ever again is something we should work hard to do.
But this ride is not about Ahmad and myself. It is not about any of the SBC parents that are here. It is about our children, all of our children.
And you have an agenda. Would you share it with everybody?
You know, that agenda is that we don't want to see any parents go through what we've been through. And the SPC Surviving Parents Coalition came together as we were actually found each other up on the steps of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., working on the Adam Walsh Act. And we had interacted with each other over the past few years, but we finally came to the conclusion that one big voice is going to do so much more than our individual voices.
My son Christopher was 10 years old when he was abducted about 2 blocks from our home where we lived in the small town of Kankakee, Illinois. 8 days later, his remains were found. He had been taken and murdered by a repeat offender. He was stabbed 53 times. They told me that he had a bruise on his jaw, that he was most likely knocked out and grabbed or something like that, or punched and then thrown in the car or something. So in my head, up until we got to trial, I always assumed he was always unconscious and he never knew what happened to him. And it wasn't until we got to trial that I found out he fought very hard for his life. Right after he went missing, I kept trying to push and get legislators involved in kind of what is like the Amber Alert now. I kept saying, if we could just have it to where immediately media breaks in to say, just like they do with, being from the Midwest, from Illinois, that there's a tornado warning, a tornado was spotted. If you have that child's picture up there, because you don't know when Gomer Pyle's sitting in the gas station and comes out and there's that kid in the car. That song is, every time I hear it, I think, that's kind of how it is for those of us that are surviving parents. It just, for so long, it feels like that's all it's doing is raining. And the sun could be shining, but inside of us, it feels like it's raining. And a lot of times it takes some of us longer than others to get beyond that point. And it took me a while. When my son was abducted and murdered, he was only 10 years old, and I couldn't, it took me a while to get beyond that point, because it felt like everything was black and white. It was like being in the Wizard of Oz, where everything's black and white and just wouldn't change over to color, and it felt like it was raining all the time.
My only daughter, Vignette Tiggs, was kidnapped. I left her with my mother, my 2 sisters, my brother, my cousin, and it was 50 neighbors on the porch. It was a project. The phone rang and my mother went inside the apartment to answer the phone. My 2 sisters went in behind her. They left my brother, my cousin, and 50 neighbors. So my daughter was sitting outside with the neighbor, and she decided to go do her dishes, so she sat her down by the hallway. So they don't know if someone was going up the stairs or coming down, and they just happened to see a little pretty baby, and they decided to take her. Back home, and I heard this lady screaming and hollering, "Kathy, Kathy." And she said, "Do you have your baby with you?" And I'm like, "No, my baby's in the bed asleep." And she said, "No, honey, your baby is missing. Do you see all the police looking around?"
She said, "Aren't you glad the rain is finally gone?" Then I heard the words for the song. She didn't understand what she was saying. But something deep inside of her must have heard me praying, 'cause it's been raining since October 17th. I don't know if you know what I mean. I've been treading water all this time. At times it brings me comfort, at times I lose my mind. So lift me up, pull me up, pick me up. Above these walls, above these waters, take this cup.
Because DNA upon felony arrest will actually save states money. It expedites investigations significantly, it helps close cases, and it helps bring some resolution to cold cases with astronomical success.
Katie was our firstborn, and Katie was a fierce protector of all that she loved. I think she saw her role as always being the one that took care of everyone in her life that needed her. I always said that if Katie loved you, she loved you like a freight train. She loved her family and her friends with a fierceness that was just unbelievable. Katie graduated in May of 2003 from New Mexico State University with a degree in marketing and business. And then she started working on her MBA, and she was looking forward to making a difference in the world. Katie worked all day at the restaurant where she was a server. After that, she went out with some friends, and then she ended up at some friend's house. And apparently she and her boyfriend had an argument. She got very angry and decided to walk home. She walked about 6 blocks home and never made it into her house. We were called the next day saying she was missing. No one had seen her since she left the party. And then later that day, we found out that she had been found by target shooters in an old city dump. She had been brutally raped, murdered, and her body set on fire. Katie really fought hard for her life, and there was skin and blood under her fingernails that had the DNA of her attacker. And that DNA was sent to CODIS, which is the database for DNA. And the detective told me that they would be running that DNA against the offender DNA frequently to look for a match. And I was very hopeful when I heard that, because I said, this guy was such a horrible man, he'll be arrested for something else, and we'll have him. And that's when I learned that in New Mexico, as in most other states, it's illegal to take DNA upon arrest.
My daughter, Bonnie Craig, was brutally raped and murdered September 28, 1994. Her killer was not identified until 12 years later by a DNA hit. I found out that her killer had been in jail 2 months before he killed her, out on parole when he killed her, and then back in jail 2 months later. This crime, if we had DNA on arrest, could have been solved within 2 months.
Together, we can make DNA testing of arrestees a reality. Reach out to law enforcement and victims advocates groups in your state today, because when dangerous criminals go free, it's our freedom that's at risk.
States must act now to close this loophole in the law. Without it, hardened criminals are allowed to get away with terrible crimes.
I can't speak forgiveness after all that I've done. I can't show my weakness after all that I've won. You speak these words, but hide your lips. I just want to know them.
October, and we were hoping to get an appointment with you, possibly to talk with you about legislation. The sheriff is going to join you guys a little earlier.
Yes, we have
than
one.
the Lincoln Police Department. So that's good.
We're good with all of that.
Yeah.
It's a little cool this morning.
I know.
Yeah, I wasn't quite ready for that. Told me it was going to be in the 70s.
70s is
Probably
nice.
I brought my
going to
same
be.
3 outfits because I still haven't had time to find my clothes.
No, I think 70s is good for me. It's California weather.
Yeah.
Those of you who bike, how many bikes? All right, good. You guys wear a helmet, right? You should. Those of you who don't, wear a helmet. It's cool to wear a helmet because guess what? It saves your head, and you can learn in the school with your head on right. Right? Now, Ed and I both have 6 kids. See, he has 6, I have 6. And my youngest is 11. You guys are around 10, 11, right? See? Right. So every time she goes out on the bike, I tell her, who are you going with? Do you guys bike alone?
Initiatives is not one more child safety initiative based on Brad kids, and it's something that we think that our children, when you look at what we're doing, trying to push legislation, supporting law enforcement, the children are the ones that have to deal with it on the front line. So helping them and empowering them, we feel is one thing that really needs to change.
Can't speak forgiveness after all that I've done. I can't show my weakness after all that I've won. You speak these words.
My sister Regina Boss disappeared October 17th, 2000 after an open mic night. She carried her guitar out, and that's the last she was seen. Her car was found the next day across the street from the pub where she played. The trunk was open about that far, and her guitar was inside, and that's it. That's all we have to this day.
It was you were the one that took my heart, turned it to stone. It was you kept your lips frozen, left all the things you had to say unspoken. It was you that I loved. It was you.
Yeah, wave here, wave up.
It was you. What have I lost now? What have I lost now? Face to the ground. Face to the ground. What does it cost now? What does it cost now? To have you around. To have you around. I'm confined by my memories. Was so blinded by keeping the key. It was you. It was you. You were the one that took my heart, turned it to stone. It was you. Kept your lips frozen.
First and last name, we know who you are, but just say first and
Ed
last.
Smart.
Okay. And your first and last name?
Ahmad Rivasfar.
Okay, so you, what, 3,500 miles?
The whole trip is about 3,500 miles. We're traveling probably about just under 2,000 of that.
Too much.
You mean not one more child?
Not one more child. Not here, not anywhere.
Not one more child. My training's been uphill, so I'm a lot more used to it. Ahmad only has flat and kind of rolling hills out where he's at, so.
She was playing in the back yard, the schoolyard, which is directly behind my house. And I had just called each child by name. They were having a good time and everything was fine. I felt no alarm. 10 minutes later, I saw them over at another set of swings about another 100 feet away. They're not allowed to go that far, so I called my son, my oldest, Justin, come home. And he came running without the other two children, Rachel and Nathan. Mm-hmm. And so I said, go get the other children. And he ran back, and when he came back, all he had was Nathan. And he said, Mommy, I have some bad news to tell you. And I said, what, honey? And he said, Rachel's in a car. I said, whose car? And he said, a blue car. And I said, what car? And he said, a black man.
He said, do you want some candy? And she came.
And got in the car with him, or did he pull her in?
Pull her in.
Finally, by looking at the child's teeth, Rachel's parents were able to say it was their daughter. The search now turns to her killer. There are no solid leads. Rachel Runyon will be buried Thursday.
I think the main thing is it's about your child and to honor your child and to really give them back their voice that they no longer have, and trust your gut feeling if something doesn't feel right as far as the investigation, as far as prosecuting teams. Keep reaching out and find your own answers. If you're not satisfied with any part that doesn't feel right, whatever it may be, stay the course for your child.
Drew's family released new home video showing her mugging for the camera and speaking at her high school graduation.
The charge is a Class A felony. Possible penalty could be 20 years in prison and $10,000 fine. Do you understand that?
Rodriguez did not enter a plea. The courtroom was packed with the missing girl's family and friends. Many held hands, their eyes welling up with tears, as the prosecutor called the three-time convicted rapist a danger to society and asked for $5 million bail.
Adam Walsh Act is all about accountability of sex offenders. We hear about some out there, and we hear about children that are being horrendously abused by them.
The sex offender registries across 50 states. The man who kidnapped and maimed my two children, left them to die, would have been a registered sex offender in many states.
And the National Sex Offender Registry, getting all of our states to comply with SORNA, When we would bump into each other as surviving parents in Washington, D.C., we were advocating for the Adam Walsh Act because it lays the foundation.
That's all I need. You just say whatever you say. Day, whatever. Sacramento, like a capital.
Hey, Mark, get over here. Get over here.
Come on.
Come on.
What is your jersey?
I want to get dirty.
Look at ours. It's kind of stinky.
Really stinky.
Give me the soundbite. It's day whatever, Sacramento.
Day 25th, Sacramento, California.
Day 26, Sacramento, California.
Day 26, Sacramento, California.
There you go.
Someday, Sacramento, California.
One day. One day.
I was supposed to have a favorite grandchild, but Tommy was the golden child.
And she made you promise to put her next to
him? I kept my promise to her. But during the spring, I come down and I plant bulbs and flowers, and I told the boys when they were little the story of the resurrection by using daffodil bulbs. And the bulb's dead. And it's planted in the ground like Jesus was planted in the ground. But in the springtimes, like Jesus rose from the dead, the flower will grow again. So that's how I explained the resurrection. We went out there and we planted bulbs together, and every year at Easter time, they would come up. And I was down here planting bulbs and had forgotten about the story, and it just hit me. It's come full circle. So every year when the flowers start blooming again, it's that blessed promise that I'm going to see him again.
Yeah.
Thousand seagulls in a football field, thousands of voices trying to yield to the way
You work for peanuts. Come on.
Nothing wrong with working for peanuts.
Mothers and children walking hand in hand, thousands of miles.
It was 2 a.m. Phone rang, South Korea. And I'm thinking it's just breakfast time, it's time to get up. Erica, my oldest daughter, and I were planning to shop to drop because there's no shopping like Korea. So, phone rang, she answers the phone. I'm, going to brush the teeth. And she says, Mom, we have to go take a phone call, come on. And I'm going, I'm in my pajamas for Pete's sakes. I have to get dressed. So hurry up. And it's very presumptuous. So I'm going, all right, chill. So I get dressed. We go down to the car, absolute silence. She takes the phone and she's just grunting. She pulls out a pen, she starts writing. And she just thrusts the phone at me. And I'm going, what? So I said hello, and it's Robin, my second daughter on the line. And she says, Mom? I go, yeah? There's silence. And I go, Robin? Mom? You talk to me? There's silence. And so I put on my most calming mommy voice. Robin, this is your mother. Speak to me. There's nothing. And I thought, gosh, what's happening? And it was after 9/11. I thought the bomb was going. And I know Robin's okay, but it's probably friends, etc. So still there's this stony silence. So finally this woman comes on the phone. But this woman is very patient, and she keeps telling me over and over and over again, and I swear to God, it sounded like a virgin. What? Until finally she got me to understand what had happened. And at that point in my life, Technicolor.
We had a little brother, 4, who was left behind. We were taken to a nearby wooded area by a man we knew well, and I was raped, and both Sarah and I were left for dead in the woods. This man had cut our throats, and I was there lying, waiting for this man to leave as I played dead to keep myself from being indefinitely killed by this man, listening to my sister scream and cry. After he ran away like a coward and left the woods, I got up and I looked over at my sister, and at this point I didn't feel any more pain. But when I looked at my sister, and I knew by the look of her that I was going to have to walk out of those woods without her.
You like me or you don't. You love me or you just won't. We're on the same page, not. You're cold or you're just too hot. You support me in the truth, or you're tangled up in our youth. You're in or you're out, or you're just leaving town. I can't read your mind. I've got my hands full reading mine. I can only meet you on the love side of the line. All these years of hopes and tears as we've crossed over time. Just stay, baby, stay. Stay away.
It's truth or it's all lies. It's love or fear in disguise. You see something in me, well, there's nothing left for you to see. It's a game or it's not. It's not comfortable in this spot. Riding the fence takes too much skill,
'cause eventually we'll spill. I can't read your mind, I've got my hands full reading mine. I can only meet you on the left side of the line. All these years of hopes and tears as we've crossed over time. Just stay, baby, stay. Stay away. Stick to your story under your breath, but it's not a story that I've heard yet, and I can't read. My hands full reading mine. I can't read your mind. I've got my hands full reading mine. I can only meet you on the left side of the line. All these years of hopes and tears as we've crossed over time. Just stay, baby, stay.
Well, it's 8:40 in the morning, and we are at KTLA News waiting for Ed and Ahmad to arrive. We're running late. They're running late. And they only have one bike for a 2-bike shot. When I arrived at home, I think it was about 30 minutes after Samantha had been taken, and our entire condominium complex had been taped off. So the whole area had been secured, and the response was unbelievable. They already had a machine on a police vehicle right outside our door that was making posters and faxing them to the media to put out an alert. We didn't have Amber Alert, but we had a Care Alert, is what they called it. So the media was brought into the loop right away, and I think that had a lot to do with the public's response and engagement in Samantha's case. There were about 2,000 tips. So Samantha's body was found really miraculously by a paraglider coming in for a landing over a cliff. And she was 20 feet up from the road. So had a paraglider not come in, she could not be seen from the road. And so we were very lucky that she was found the very next day. And I've come to know so many families whose children have been missing for years and years. And they, to me, they are a huge part of my motivating factor, because I think I'd be crazy. I don't know that I could function the way that I function if I did not know where Samantha was. And so I hold them in great honor, that those who are able to keep going, these parents who don't know where their babies are and they have to go to work the next day.
In the spring of 1997, Laura Kate Smither was this child, the missing child. Laura had gone out for a morning run and never returned again. It's every parent's worst fear. After a massive 17-day nationwide search, Laura's remains were recovered. The community was devastated.
Abduction prevention is absolutely critical in this day and age. There are over 500,000 sexual predators on the loose in the United States every day. And as such, we as a community need to be prepared for them. We need our children to have the educational tools available to them to keep them safe.
The Safety Education Initiative, called Not One More Child, has several different parts in it. It has the Rad Kids Personal Empowerment and Safety Education Program, and it has fingerprinting and ID kit.
And Rad Kids is a comprehensive safety education program that teaches not just self-defense and realistic physical skills to resist violence and abduction, but teaches children all about how to keep themselves safe.
No!
What you just saw was a child escaping abduction. What you just saw was a child escaping abduction.
We are the Surviving Parents Coalition. We are the Surviving Parents Coalition.
Not one more child.
Not one more child. Not here, not anywhere. We are the Surviving Parents Coalition. We are the Surviving Parents Coalition.
And we
advocate for laws
that will protect your children
from suffering the same fate as ours.
Not one more child. Not here, not anywhere.
From suffering.
we are that will protect your children, your children, your children.
We are the Surviving Parents Coalition.
Please go to spcoalition.org to find out how you can join our mission.
Please
join.
Not one more child. Not here, not anywhere.
Your children, your children, your children.
Not here, not anywhere.
Please.
And your ability to take that horror and really devote your life to stopping it from ever happening again, it makes you my hero.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate that. Just know that you're our hero.
Well, that's not in any way.
We can't.
I am not in your league.
Well, we cannot be heard at all.
Well,
If you don't talk about these things,
we're going to make sure to give you a voice.
My name's Dina Thompson, and I'm from Orange Park, Florida. And my twin daughter got abducted walking home from school on Monday, October 19th, 2009. Broad daylight, other children walking home, walking with their siblings, and the monster just picked her up and took her away. Sadly, but by the grace of God, I found her body 2 days later in the Georgia landfill.
No trace of what we left behind. No evidence of how I love you. It was easy.
you have to get in front of them. So Alicia, she's my hero, and I told her once that it was about the first time that either one of us had spoken. We had met, and I told her that Jesse will speak through you. A lot of children will speak through you because you survived what they couldn't. And we all have to keep one thing in mind, and that's who has it worse, the child that dies or the child that survives.
Places only we could go. Truth is that I never left you, never left you. I just loved.
As we've crossed the country, I've shared this this passage from a 12-year-old who had been very much victimized, and I'm going to repeat it one last time today. She entitled this journal entry, "Every Night," and I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I think reiterating the points that what she felt she could do is so important for each one of us to know how desperate children are out there. I try not to cry, but I do it anyway. I keep it to myself, but it I never know what to do. I have things that I can do. 1, I can tell my mother. 2, stay with my daddy or my aunt. 3, sleep with a knife. 4, try to kill him. And 5, keep letting it happen. 6, keep it to myself. And 7, pray about it. And I try to pray about it, but it never goes away. Her final comment in this entry was a call that each one of us must take home. We must do something. P.S. If you are reading this, help me. I really, really need your help. The importance of this ride is that our children do need our help. Whether it's getting Adam Walsh in compliance across the board, as the Amber Alert has demonstrated we can do, whether it's getting the DNA passed, but most importantly, to step forward and make sure that our children are prepared.
That I never left you, I never walked away. I always tried to connect to the love lost in the space. I just want you to know there are places only we could go. Truth is that I never left you, never left you. I just lost you. Is your heart calling out for ransom? Is your heart calling out for me? I'll pay you back for what this cost you. Unbreak this heart that lost you. 'Cause I still want you to this day, and I'm still reeling from the pain. Truth is that I never left you, I never walked away. Always tried to connect to the love lost in the space, but I just wanted you to know.
It's been an amazing journey across the country. Ahmad and I were talking today about what was the most outstanding thing that happened as we crossed. And the one thing that kept coming to us was how people out there want to know what they can do to make a change in our country. We've had an opportunity of talking with some amazing people. This is one of the most amazing men I have ever met. I love him and he is fantastic. He's a great brother.
She was playing at the ballpark. He was riding his bike. She was walking to school, following what she thought were the rules. She was playing in her yard. He was shopping with his mama. She met someone on the internet. Now pictures of them, what we have left. So we ride, 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 ride. just like a lion, we care for our cubs. We gotta stop this cycle, we just can't give up, no. For those who survived, this is our right, the right for their lives, 'cause every little one's our pride. So we ride, 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 ride. So we ride, 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 ride. So we ride, 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 ride. For their lives. So we ride. For their lives. So we ride. No, no, not one more child, no, no. No, no, not one more child, no, no, no.